Well, good morning, everyone. It's so great to see everyone filing in from the waiting room. A lot of familiar names and some new names as well. It's good to see a number of you have been able to make all three of these sessions during this accessibility webinar series. And we're just so grateful to the South Dakota Arts Council and to Arts Midwest for continuing this conversation around accessibility in the arts. Before we get started today, I just want to quick say thank you again to the South Dakota Arts Council and Arts Midwest, as well as the Bush Foundation and the National Endowment for the Arts, whose funding and support really makes all of these professional development opportunities and webinars possible. So many of you have been on our Arts South Dakota webinars before. My name is Andrew Reinertz. I'm the Community Development Director with Arts South Dakota. I'll be turning it over to Kate with the South Dakota Arts Council shortly, but if you have any questions at all during the course of the session today, please feel free to use the Q&A button in Zoom. That really helps me to track the questions, and then I can bring those up to Kate when we get to some breaks for question and answer time. But also feel free to use the chat function to say hello to the panelists, to say hello to each other, and if you have any other technical questions that you need help with. So I guess, usually we have a little more of a preamble, but I think today we're just going to jump right in. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Kate Vandel with the South Dakota Arts Council.
Thank you, Andrew. I also want to just give a huge thank you to the Arts South Dakota for hosting these webinars. Just as a reminder, this is the third in a series that Arts South Dakota has partnered with us on, focused just on accessibility. I will reference those throughout my conversation with you all today, and I hope that you all go back and watch those other two. I will say it was a bit of a challenge to be third in line and not be redundant, and to try to come up with some new information for you all today. With that, I will go ahead and make sure that I can share my screen. And hopefully that's up and working. Okay, I'm getting a nod from Andrew, so I'm going to assume that that means we're good to go. So again, my name is Kate Vandel. I am the grant specialist with the South Dakota Arts Council. I also act as our accessibility coordinator, which is a requirement for the National Endowment for the Arts as a state arts agency. I want to again thank you all for being here today, and again just show my appreciation for Arts South Dakota and hosting this session. I just want to remind everyone that the priorities of the South Dakota Arts Council is to work alongside our constituents, and that's part of the conversation that we'll be having today. We so appreciate the work and support of the arts throughout our state, and we believe it's our purpose to serve South Dakotans and their entire community through the arts. We're ready to serve you as our constituents. We fully support your enthusiasm. We also recognize your challenges, which we're going to touch on today. And we look forward to working alongside you to transform South Dakota's community and its people through the arts. You'll find my contact information here, and I'm sure that Andrew will share that out on the slides after this conversation takes place. You can reach me by email or phone number, and you'll find my direct contact for both email and phone on the slide here. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to take a quick review of federal laws and regulations related to accessibility. We're also going to talk about how this information informs how you better serve your community. And then we do have a new tool in place that we'll be requesting from our grantees this upcoming grant cycle. The organizational grantees will have an opportunity to fill out and submit an accessibility checklist. Again, this is a request from the South Dakota Arts Council and not yet a requirement. So we'll look through that checklist together and just talk about the why behind us developing that list. And then I'm going to provide you with some resources to help you on your journey towards improving access to your place and your programs. So that's kind of the gist of what we're going to talk about, and we'll dig in on the most exciting part of the conversation, our accessibility laws and regulations. So the South Dakota Arts Council receives grant support from the National Endowment for the Arts. They are a federal agency, and so we are required to follow those federal laws related to accessibility. That said, we are a pass-through agency of federal funds. And so all of our grantees are also required to comply with those accessibility regulations and laws. As I said, grant recipients must agree to follow those laws and regulations prohibiting discrimination, particularly when it comes to not allowing access for anyone that has a disability. Two of those top tier laws and regulations would be Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. I do just want to add again that on June 14th, Arts South Dakota hosted a webinar with the National Endowment for the Arts Office of Accessibility. If you would like more information on those laws and regulations from the Office of Accessibility, I would encourage you to go back and review that webinar. So starting at the top with the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, specifically Section 504 prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in any program or activity receiving federal assistance. So like I said, the South Dakota Arts Council is a pass-through of federal money. And so that is part of your general terms and conditions when you sign your grant agreement with the State Arts Council. You'll see that it also forbids organizations and employers from excluding or denying individuals with disability an equal opportunity to receive program benefits and services. And I will provide a list of links to Andrew with the full Section 504. If you do have questions or want to review that on your own, I would encourage you to do so. Moving into the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. So on July 26, 1990, President George H.W. Bush signed into law the ADA. It's a comprehensive civil rights law prohibiting discrimination on the basis of disability. The ADA broadly protects the rights of individuals with disabilities in employment, access to state and local government services, and also places of public accommodation, transportation, and other important areas of American life. And we'll dig into some of those things that are bolded on this screen. You'll see that I've bolded disability, places of public accommodation. And so I went out to the ADA's website and pulled how they define these. So like I said, the Americans with Disabilities Act, is designed to make sure that people with disabilities have equal access to work, education, and their community. And that word community is so vital for the work that we all do across the states. The ADA defines a disability as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity. And then as far as places of public accommodation, this would include any organization that's open to the public. So a restaurant, a hotel, and then we really dig in on the work that we do when we talk about theaters and arenas and museums. They all must be physically accessible to individuals with disabilities and provide reasonable modifications or accommodations is a word that you'll see often for everyone to be able to access the facility as well as the programming that they offer. And I've provided the link on the bottom of the screen here. Like I said, that will be in the slides that Andrew sends out, as well as in a document that includes just the links presented in this conversation. So just for an example of a reasonable accommodation, let's say a person with vision loss goes into a restaurant and is having difficulty reading the menu. That customer may and should receive a menu that is easier for them to read, or they have the ability to have someone from the restaurant read that menu for them. So that's just an example of a reasonable accommodation in a place of public accommodation. Again, these are coming from the ADA, so I've provided that link at the bottom of the screen. Digging in a little bit into our communities and disability estimates. I will say that the National Endowment for the Arts webinar also talked about both national and statewide estimates, but I did want to include that here because I think it's really relevant to the conversation that we're having today. So it is 1 in 4, or 27% of adults in the US that have some type of a disability. In South Dakota, that 1 in 4 relates to over 167,000 residents of our state with a disability. And I provided some further dig-in data here. So that's 11% with a cognition disability. And just for everyone's reference, a cognitive or cognition disability would be, trouble concentrating, remembering, making decisions. I know that on the daily, I have some level of cognitive, difficulty, but not necessarily a high enough level to have a cognition disability. And then 10% of our residents in South Dakota have a mobility disability. And again, just to further define that, that would be difficulty walking up the stairs or walking in general. 6% have a difficulty hearing, and then we have 3% with high vision disability or full-on blindness, even in spite of wearing glasses. Normally I would have my eyeglasses on. I took them off to restrict the glare, but even with or without glasses on, I still am able to see. And so it's not high enough level for it to be a disability for me personally. Again, these data points come from the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, and I've included those links to further information on both the national data and the statewide data. So how does this relate to your community? And when I found these statistics from the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act website, I found it very interesting. So many of us serve a population or people that is over 65, and many of us are also serving people that are over 75. So as I've learned in the last year, as we age, things just get harder. You may start to develop problems with hearing, seeing, or getting around. And so this data, I think, is really important for us to think about and digest as it relates to our community and the community that we're serving through the arts. So over 30% of Americans over the age of 65 are dealing with some level of disability. And then when we look at those residents, those audience members over the age of 75, we're really pushing into 50% or more territory. So I just posed a couple of questions here. If you serve a population over 65, do you feel like your facility and your programming is meeting their needs? Are the accommodations that you're offering meeting the needs of these audience members and those that want to participate in the programming you do, whether that's sitting in the audience or active on stage? Whatever the art programming that you're providing is something to start to really think about. And then are you welcoming the people from your community with a disability? Or is it that maybe 25% of your community is missing out either on your organization or your programming because you're just not meeting those accessible needs? Again, I wanna just touch on the second webinar that Arts South Dakota hosted. They had an amazing panel that talked long and hard and so heartfelt about the importance of meeting the needs of everyone in the community. We heard from organizations that are meeting the community's needs on all sides of the coin. the stage, as it were, what it means to be meeting accessible audience members, meeting audience members with a disability on the front of the stage, and then being able to accommodate those people in the full community on your stage itself. So again, really hammering home the importance of serving and servicing the entire community. And I would encourage you all to go back and watch that. The Arts Council is dedicated to serving all South Dakotans and their communities through the arts, and we know that all of you strive to achieve that goal as well. That's why we're asking you to consider these questions that I have on the screen, and then also the questions that we're going to be posing in that accessibility checklist. So moving over to that, again, just hitting home that South Dakota Arts Council funded projects and organizations must be accessible to people with disabilities. So this is a new request from our office, and it really spurred from a lot of internal conversations just around the idea of increased accessibility for people to engage with the arts across South Dakota. If you applied for a project grant in 2024, so you would have submitted it in March of 2023, applicants were required to respond to this question. Is this project accessible for individuals with disabilities, including but not limited to individuals who are deaf, hard of hearing, deafblind, have difficulty speaking, have a physical disability, visual disability, developmental disability, learning disability, mental illness, or chronic illness? And so that question will also be incorporated into our upcoming general operating support grant, which is our highest level of support with our Arts Challenge grantees. And then we'll also be requesting that all organizational applicants and anyone serving the public is providing an accessibility checklist as part of their application. So again, to ensure that the largest organizations across the state are meeting the needs of the entire community, that application for Arts Challenge will include a request for this accessibility checklist, as will our project grant application moving into the upcoming year. So we would anticipate that application being live online around January 1st of 2024. And with so many of our Arts Challenge grantees and larger organizations doing the bulk of their work during the summer, we wanted to pose these questions now so that people can start thinking about them moving into that upcoming application and really consider them while they're taking in the largest number of audience members, as well as having most likely the largest number of people on their stage or participating in their programming and their presentations throughout the summertime. So that's why we're having this conversation now. We will also be providing more information on the accessibility checklist as the application gets closer. And then I'm sure providing more conversations with our friends at Arts South Dakota so that people are just reminded that this is a request from our agency moving forward with application. So what is the accessibility checklist? It is inspired and adapted from the National Endowment for the Arts brief accessibility checklist. And if you cross-reference the NEA's checklist to our checklist, it is close to identical, just because they're asking all the questions that we also want to know. And they're also providing a laundry list of resources and links within that document to be able to find more information on what that question is asking. Just so everyone is aware, and I will repeat this until the questions end, this tool is here to help you. It will not hinder you from getting funding. We are looking for your open and honest answers to these questions so we as a granting agency can better understand how we can better help you meet the needs of your entire community. We are not putting up a barrier so that you can't get funding if you answer no to one of these questions. We want open and honest conversation moving forward about accessibility and about the communities that you serve. And so this is just a tool that we are implementing to help you have those conversations and help us better understand what questions are out there related to accessibility. I'm not going to go through the full list. This is just a draft copy of the document, is posted online and will be shared out after this session. We are also in the process of trying to figure out exactly what questions are a priority for our office. So this is a draft copy that we've posted online for now. And I just want everyone to be aware that it will likely look very similar when application opens in January, but there may be shifts and things that get moved around. So as it comes to physical accessibility, I worked in the museum field for almost 15 years, and the first thing that we're always told to think about is how does the audiences or the participants experience start? And so I'm asking you to start in the same spot. What is it like to park at your facility, to get into your facility? And then once I'm inside, what's it like when I'm in there? If I have a mobility issue or something of that nature, am I able to get in the building? Am I able to move around the facility, engage in the way that anybody else would be able to, with the programs, with the exhibitions, with the art, with the works that's on display? So you'll see a series of questions, again, very similar to this, on that accessibility checklist. So again, we're just asking you to start from the outside, work your way all the way to the inside, and then again, under the lens of how it feels to be inside that space and move around that space, from the side of accessibility. I'm sure we all have stories. I know that I do. I travel with my parents who are in their 70s and 80s quite often. And it's really frustrating when you're just trying to engage in an arts activity and you can't get in the front door. So that's really, it doesn't invite or entice you to continue that experience when that first barrier is prohibiting you from coming in. So that's what we're asking you to start with on the outside, working in. And then also kind of the general program access. Again, a draft copy of this document is available online. And just like we did with the physical access, we would ask you again to start with that first encounter, that first engagement that someone interested in participating would have with your organization or with your programming. So think about how someone interacts with you or your agency for the first time. Do you have someone there available to field those accommodation requests or to have conversations with what accommodations look like? Do you have a policy or a mission statement that includes or focuses on accessibility? Are there people within your community or on your committees to help you support the process of becoming more accessible for everyone within your community? And then are you offering multiple ways for visitors to engage with the programming that you present? I was at an arts function last week and saw that they had assistive listening devices available for checkout if needed. So that's just an example of a assistive device or an accommodation for everyone in the audience to be able to engage with that programming as it's happening. So we've kind of moved from being able to be in the physical space of your programming to actually engage with the programming that you're offering. So again, a draft copy of that accessibility checklist is available for download. It's not a fillable copy, it's just a flat out PDF copy at this point, and we'll figure out the best way to move that forward when it comes to application, when time and staff can commit some more, a little bit more time for that. We would recommend that you start with a few resources from the National Endowment for the Arts. Like I said, I worked in museums for almost 15 years, and the Design for Accessibility, I have a copy of it on my desk still. Design for Accessibility, a Cultural Administrator's Handbook, is where we would strongly recommend you start. It really does provide chapter by chapter how to achieve accessibility either on the physical or the programmatic side. The National Endowment for the Arts has it available for download on the internet, and there's a link here, and there'll be a link on the slides that I provide to Andrew after this conversation. So that would be a great place to start. I would also add that the Americans for Disability Act has a website that is focused on the guidelines for accessibility. Those are far more reaching into the physical access side of things, but that was another printed document that I kept on my desk on the regular, just for help in determining typeface and signage and those kinds of details. So that will be part of that links document that I share to Andrew after this conversation. Speaking of resources, I would just add that the Rocky Mountain ADA Association also offers a guide on how to use that ADA standards guide, and that link will be included in the document to Andrew as well. So where else can you look for information on accessibility and access in general? Again, I would go back to those webinars that Arts South Dakota has already hosted. The conversation with the National Endowment for the Arts, Office of Accessibility, that was with Beth and Catherine, and they provided some incredible information and very useful tools for helping you through this process. As I mentioned, our region has its own ADA center. And so we fall under the Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and their website has a host of upcoming trainings and resources, as well as, like I mentioned, a blog that provides a number of up-to-date references and resources for anything related to accessibility and specifically the ADA. I would encourage you also to look at support documents and services available from the South Dakota Department of Human Services. And then the University of South Dakota has a Center for Disabilities, and that would be another place that I would encourage you to go for resources on accessibility. And that is all I have. I am certainly open to questions as part of this conversation, or if you have any questions related to access or accessibility as we get closer to application time, or just in general, I want to encourage you all to reach out to myself at the Arts Council or any one of the Arts Council staff with any questions that you may have.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kate. I really liked your example of just that sort of front experience, you know, kind of the customer service side of things, where it reminds me of a couple of the conversations that came up in the panel session, kind of leading towards the idea of being welcoming and not just accessible. You know, and I kind of brought up the same thing when the state arts conference was in Rapid City a couple of years ago, and they were, unfortunately, the hotel that we had the convention at had their front lobby, which is the real accessible entrance, all under construction. And so, yes, legally there was an accessible entrance around the side, but it was around the side of the building, kind of by the garbage cans, and you know, it just wasn't really a very welcoming experience for folks coming. So it's just a really good reminder. Just if anyone has questions, please feel free to throw them into the Q&A, and I'll bring them up to Kate. We have one here. That's a great question of if there's an organization that can't afford to purchase any special devices, hearing supported devices, things like that, say they're only doing specific events occasionally, are there any places or resources for renting or purchasing them that you know of?
You know, nothing comes to mind for me, but again, the South Dakota Department of Human Services may have more resources than I'm aware of. And that would be the first point of contact that I would recommend making. They may have information on how to rent or borrow those assisted listening devices. They may also know of grant opportunities for being able to purchase those. I would also add that accommodations or anything to help an audience member participate in your programming would be something that you could apply for a project grant for. So as you're planning your project grant, if you are considering doing any type of public programming and you feel like, hey, we could really, our sound system is really gone in the dump and we really need some better microphones so that people can better hear our actors up on stage, just for an example. So that would definitely be something that you could include as part of your
Mm.
application. Now, when it comes to things that are permanent structures, that would be something that would be quite different and would kind of fall into our unallowable category
Mm.
of support. But when it comes to things that are temporary or things that are programmatic, assistive devices, whether that's large print, a large print publication
Mm.
for your program, for your series of plays that you're doing throughout the year, or musicals, that would be something that would totally be allowable under the marketing line item or even the general line item in your project grant application. Yeah.
Yeah, great. That's great to know. And it reminds me too, we've been trying to be better at Art South Dakota of just anytime we have a meeting, even if it's, if it's beyond 8 people for a board meeting, but anytime there's a public meeting, just having a microphone, there's so many times where speakers will say, "Oh, I can project," and I'm like, it's not about how loud your voice is. It's, I've had that experience as a musician that can hear pretty well sitting in the back of a room really straining and feeling like I'm not enjoying it, let alone people with real accessibility needs. So sometimes it's as simple as just having some core things in place that don't really take much effort in planning and financial outlay.
Yeah, and that, one of the items on that programmatic accessibility checklist is do you have someone on your committee or do you have a specific access committee to help you with this? And it doesn't have to be anything more than inviting some people from your community in to listen or be in the space where you plan to have your program or your presentation and say, hey, Fred, in the back 40, can you hear me okay without a mic, or am I going to be better with a microphone? So it doesn't have to be a specific committee or a specific group of people that you rely on, but it is always good just to have some people that you can call on for that kind of thing. Even when it came to the hotel in Rapid City, it was a matter of good signage and doing the best we could to make sure someone was there to help people come in
Hmm.
and out if they needed support. So yeah, it's just so often on accessibility webinars and calls, we really hear that it's if you welcome in everybody from your community, the experience is so much better for everyone. Like it's unreal. And some days I don't want to go up the stairs. I'd way rather use an elevator. And when there's one available and I'm tired, even though I'm a capable person and moving up and down the stairs, having that elevator there makes it easier on me for those days that I'm tired. So just thinking of it in terms of that, your best day may not be your best day every day. And how would you want your facility to serve you on those not best days? And think of how much better it would serve you if you could serve everyone every single day. It would be incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Well, you've seemed to have answered everyone's questions pretty well. There haven't been any others coming in, and that's a really great kind of high point summary to end on today. So I just want to say thank you again, Kate, for all you do with the State Arts Council and especially with your work as the accessibility coordinator. And thank you, everyone, for attending and for everything you do to help keep South Dakota creative and doing such interesting, important work all across the state. So as Kate mentioned, I'll definitely be sharing out the slides and the recording from today. And also please be in touch with any of us at Art South Dakota if you have any other ideas for professional development for webinars, any needs that you have, and we'll see what we can do. And just wishing you all a wonderful, hopefully it's sunny down here in the southeast part of the state, so hopefully it's sunny where everyone else is, and hope you all have a wonderful day. Thanks, Kate.